Racism against white people doesn't exist, and it literally never has. The entire concept of race was created by white people. When you begin to study the historical facts, you understand that this entire system of racism is white supremacy. It only goes in one direction. There's never been racism against white people. White Europeans created this idea of black as a way to dehumanize Africans, to subjugate them, to degrade them. Black meant less than human. It meant inferior. And then after they had that idea of black, they came up with this idea that they were, by contrast, white, which meant superior, more moral. That's what those words meant. That is why they were created, was so that white people could justify the entire system of slavery of Africans, so that they could have a justification for why the children of African slaves would also be slaves, why they would be born into slavery. It was because they dehumanized them with this concept of race. That's what racism is. It's always been that. It has always been white supremacy. And the thing is that our society, our government, never made things right, never leveled the playing field. So it's really never changed. Our society continued to produce racial inequality. It's what we've always done. The status quo of our society is white supremacy. It is racism, which is systemic. Systemic racism is racism. That's why there is no racism against white people. The idea is just utterly absurd. And what white people need to understand is that if there are people of color who are frustrated with white people, who are resentful and maybe distrusting of white people's motives, skeptical of white people, there's a reason for that. The reason is racism. The reason is white supremacy. Those people of color are merely reacting to racism. They're reacting to their entire lifetime's worth of experiences of enduring racism, racial oppression, as well as the lifetimes of their parents, their grandparents, their entire family. We cannot think that someone being mean to us as a white person, someone, being distrusting of us or having an attitude with us or making a statement about white people, we can't pretend as though that's the same thing as what people of color deal with, because it's just not. It never will be. That's our hurt feelings are not oppression. Our discomfort is not oppression. There's a reason why people of color might not trust us, and we have to get at the root cause. The root cause is racism. And so we need to speak up. We need to raise consciousness about our biases. The more we begin to understand that all white people are racist, the better off we'll be. And this includes me. I have racist biases. We all have racist biases. We've all been socialized, conditioned, brainwashed into the system of white supremacy. It is undeniable. All of us. This is the underlying structural foundation of our society. And if this makes you uncomfortable, that's okay, because that's part of the process. You feeling uncomfortable and maybe getting your feelings hurt and feeling like you need to be defensive, that's part of the process to get to a place where you accept reality and that you begin to speak up against systemic racism, which is racism, against white supremacy, and you begin to advocate for the changes that we need. Because again, our government has never made it right. White people created racism, created this inequality, and we've never changed it. We continue to perpetuate this status quo of racial inequality, of racist oppression, of traumatizing people of color. And we continue to invalidate and dismiss them and their experiences with oppression, with discrimination, with brutality, with abuse. This is a reality. And it's not saying that every white person has had a super easy life. That's not what white privilege means. But it is that we are not disadvantaged based on race. Our race is not a factor making our lives harder. It just isn't. We are not oppressed based on race. And that is a fact. Oppression is not a feeling. It is an undeniable fact. It has been throughout our history, and it continues to be to this day. The more you begin to learn about this, the more you realize you don't have to be defensive. It's okay. We are all racist. All of us white people are, and we are all conditioned, socialized, brainwashed into the system of white supremacy. It's part of our unconscious thinking. We need to raise consciousness. We need to understand our biases, and we need to begin to speak up and advocate for change. I hope you will do it. You don't need to be angry and uncomfortable with this. Facts are what they are. I encourage you to learn and read about this. PBS has a great video on YouTube called Origin of Race in the USA. And they have in their description a bunch of citations, links to scholarly articles and books. There's also an excellent video about, if you Google invention of race, there's an article on Aeon written by a PhD scholar regarding how a playwright originally coined how I'm looking at it now. How white people were invented by a playwright in 1613 is the name of the article. And it is all about how white people normalized this idea of race and black and white in order to justify slavery. Slavery of Africans. And I'm not saying that other races didn't have slavery before. They did, but it wasn't based on racism or race. And it is the Europeans who came to America with the African slaves who came up with this concept of race. And this is a fact. Racism only goes in one direction. It is white supremacy. That's what it is. Let's speak up. Let's understand it. Let's stop being defensive. Let's stop being uncomfortable with this conversation. Thank you for listening and learning today. I appreciate it.